Hello and welcome to another edition of Goalmouth Scramble. I'm Tom Mortlock and we've got a studio full of guests this afternoon to talk about the England squad, Hazard moving to Real Madrid, we've got Henry managerial links as well, PNE and Ipswich roundup, and we'll also be talking about how our Premier League predictions are going so far this season. But joining me in the studio to do all that, firstly, Ollie Portlock, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tom.
George Hodgson.
Hello.
Jason Hamburger.
Good afternoon.
And making his debut on the podcast today, Ryan Smart.
It's great to be here. Good afternoon.
Good to have you. Thanks very much for joining us. Let's start straight away then. Let's crack on with the England squad then. Notable names. Of course, Jadon Sancho's been the big link. Or the big talked about player in that squad. James Maddison's in there. Mason Mount. Nathaniel Chalobah getting a few people talking about him as well. But Ollie, we'll start with you. What do you think about those names, and what stands out for you from this squad as for the games in the Nations League between England and Croatia and Spain?
Well, I think there's some bold selections. Some have been forced for Southgate. I think, was it Lingard and Ali had been injured at the time. Loftus-Cheek wasn't selected due to some sort of injury scare, despite playing in the Europa League for Chelsea. The players they've called up, looking at the form they've been in this season, James Maddison and Jadon Sancho in particular, you can't argue with it, to be fair. I think Sancho has been on fire, with the assists in Bundesliga, and James Maddison, well, he's certainly made the step up to Premier League football very well. I was mightily impressed because before the season I was thinking, Christ, this price tag they've paid is pretty hefty, but he's justifying it, and the form does only get you to one place. It's the national team, and I feel he'll be the sort of player that will be very proud to wear the 3 lines on his shirt. And I think a lot of Southgate squads, but none more so than this one, I think scream that opportunity, and it's a massive opportunity for these players, as there have been injuries to the regulars, you could say, after the World Cup, and it's a chance for these players to prove the worth to the England team. And Lewis Dunk came in and Ben Chilwell for, was it Luke Shaw, and again, 2 more inexperienced players who get a massive opportunity to show what they can bring to this England side.
George, are we seeing an insight into how Southgate wants this England team to be going forward? We've got a lot more young players involved, but also in Mason Mount, someone who's playing regular Championship football at Derby, and he's getting a shout as well.
I think so, yeah. I like that he's not afraid to give anyone a selection. It doesn't matter who they play for. I think everyone will know if they're playing well, then Southgate's going to look at them and give them the chance, which must give players a lot of confidence and belief. Obviously, they'll see what England did in the summer, and it's something they want to be a part of. There's a few questionable selections, I think. Chalobah, I'm not sure about that one, when there's players like Will Hughes and another couple others that perhaps could have got the nod over him, but I like some of the names that he's picked, Maddison especially, who I think could fit right into this England squad.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Southgate in the way, it's like George mentioned, he's a brave in terms of his selection, and he likes picking young players, and he's got a clear identity of the squad. Like George also mentioned, I'm just not sure. I think he's so desperate to bring in these young players that I'm not actually sure some of them are deserved. I don't see why Chalobah was picked, not starting the Premier League, played 4 minutes in the Premier League, so he's just come back from injury. Similarly, Mason Mount, he's obviously shown a lot of talent, but do we really need to put him in the senior squad, not get some more games in the under-21s? I like Maddison. Sancho is a brilliant talent, and I can understand why they've fast-tracked him into the team. As long as he gets minutes and gets chances, then I think he'll be fine. I think it's good that he's playing in the Bundesliga, because the hype's not there as much as it would be if he was playing the Premier League. There's not as much attention, even though we are seeing it, on social media and the videos of him, but he's not getting that hype that Wayne Rooney got, for example, and a few other talents. So overall, I think it's just good to see that, you know, England fans as a whole are looking forward to the games rather than seeing the same old names. I think that's a positive thing. Lewis Dunk is another name that I'm a bit not disappointed, but I just don't really see why he's gone for him. He's a middle of the road defender, can clear the ball. I'm not seeing anything of him that seems that he can just walk into that England team and play like Harry Maguire and John Stones. He's not got that technique. He plays in a Brighton team that's rather defensive. I don't personally see why he's been drafted in, but
I suppose
overall,
it's not a full strength squad either.
No, it's not, and I can understand that, but I think I prefer to see him, even someone like Lascelles, possibly another defender that's got just a bit more ability on the ball. But overall, it's I like Southgate's thinking.
Ryan, or specifically on Jadon Sancho, because he's been the one to make sort of the big headlines, I guess, particularly with the way that he's moved abroad. Is that's quite an impressive thing to do for not just a youngster, but an English player as well. We don't see very many English players making that bold leap of faith to try and further their careers abroad and maybe putting themselves into contention for international selection.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it takes a pretty strong character to make the move abroad at an early age, and I think he saw that at Man City he wasn't have those chances of getting into the first team with obviously the talents that he have got, and making the move to Dortmund, and he's started quite a few games, got a few assists, and obviously the confidence he'll get from that's massive. And I think the big thing at Dortmund is that they don't always make their attackers start every game, they give them rest, they sort of rotate them round, and I think that's also good for him at this age, sort of help his development, and he's really come on well in the last year, and I think he fully deserves the call-up.
Guys, other thoughts on Jadon Sancho?
Sancho is, a couple of weeks ago I spoke about Foden and Sancho obviously being part of the same age group, winning the World Cup, the under-17s. Sancho is just one of those players that you just give him the ball and you expect just absolute terror off him. He's just a great talent. I also, like Ryan mentioned, I think it's a really good move for him going to Dortmund. He's seen that there's so much competition at City, and he's just happy. Like a few of the other players, it's becoming common now to see English players playing the Bundesliga with Reece Oxford and Reece Nelson joining him there. It's just great to see someone like that play abroad. He's going to learn so much off players like Royce, Goetze, and just a different culture. I'm sure he's probably learned a language. He'll come into the England team and he won't fear anything, because there's nothing more difficult than going to a new country and playing different style of football. He'll have learnt so much, and you've got to admire him for that.
I agree. I think another good thing is that it's nice to see him willing to recall players that haven't been in the squad for a long time. One particular name being Ross Barkley. I think it's first time since May 2016 he was called up to the England squad, and I think this season he's really he's a bit like a duck that's taken to water under Sarri. He against Southampton he was fantastic in winning the ball back and feeding in Hazard for the first goal, and obviously getting a goal himself. Although I agree with Jason's earlier remarks about some questionable selections. I'm unsure on Harry Winks as well.
So am I.
I think.
No, I'm a big fan of Winks. I think.
Don't get me wrong. I think he's got a great future in the game, but if you're basing it on meritocracy, then how the hell can he get in?
It's just there's not much competition, and Winks fits the kind of style and picture of what Southgate wants to do. He's very comfortable in possession. He likes to dribble with the ball. He's just the exact prototype of what Southgate wants. It's similar to Chalobah. Those are his favourites. He's got players that he likes, and unfortunately he's going to have to pick players that don't get much football. He's only just come back from injury, but he will be a fixture. I mean, he started against Barcelona, and he started a couple of games for Spurs, most recently last week. So I think he likes those players that are younger, okay, they might not be full of experience, but there's not much to pick from. And that's the reason why.
But why do you reckon he picks players like Danny Welbeck repeatedly when you've got Daniel Sturridge?
He's got a decent England record,
That's
Danny
a good
Welbeck.
point. I was
He has,
wondering why
but-
Sturridge isn't.
Yeah.
I think he's been brilliant so far.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would have picked Sturridge ahead of Welbeck. I think he might see Welbeck as one of those.
Four goalkeepers.
Welbeck's one of those
Yeah.
versatile players that can come off the bench. I think Sturridge is. You can kind of see him. He's quite and it's not a bad thing, but he's quite He's very confident, and he probably feels like he should be starting for Liverpool and possibly for England. And I know he comes off the bench for Liverpool and has done really well, but I think he might see Welbeck as one of those characters that he likes to be around the group and just come off the bench and come on the left wing, come on the right wing, get 10 minutes there.
I think Sturridge, when you look beyond Kane, they're all players that can play out wide. There's not really a natural number 9 there, and I think, if anything happens to Kane, I think Sturridge would be a great option. And even if something wasn't going for you, like we saw what he did at Chelsea, he can just come on and he's got that real X factor. He can just come on and pull something out of anywhere, and I don't think we've really got a player that's like that. So I think as an option, he would have been good to go for. I don't know, maybe he doesn't want to go back to the old faces like we said
He
before.
did in a way with Barkley, I suppose, and
even Joe Hart's had a good season and he's not in there. So I think Southgate's
He's reluctant to do
wary that he doesn't want to go back to those old names and give people the same old feeling that just people to get picked because of the name and stuff like that.
Do you think that's also because he wants to put his own stamp on the team and visibly be so that other people can see that he's doing that, and that might generate a bit of support for him in the role?
I also think possibly he doesn't pick Sturridge because he likes his strikers to work hard off the ball, and Sturridge is quite a lazy striker. He's one of those strikers. He wants the ball to feet. He doesn't really make great runs, and that's why Klopp doesn't pick Firmino, because he's more of an intelligent, unselfish footballer. And I don't see Sturridge as that kind of man. That might be the thinking. Danny Welbeck is one of the most selfless footballers you'll ever see. He'll run himself into the ground. That's possibly why. But I also maybe could have even gone for a punt on Callum Wilson. He's had a terrific season so far, scored a few goals. He's one of those strikers that could have been an option. Suppose I would have personally gone for Sturridge, but I'm just maybe trying to explain why Southgate. But then he has picked Barkley, and Barkley's really shown this season. He's gone to Chelsea, it's a fresh start. He's come back from his injury, and he just looks more intelligent footballer. I've always seen him as a bit of a
sort of wild,
brainless. Yeah, his decision making in the final third has been poor, and I think Sarri's that type of manager to get the best out of him. Tactically, and he's probably worked with him and his composure on the ball, when to pass it, when to hold it. And you saw that, as Ollie mentioned, against Southampton. He won the ball back, great pressing, and he won the ball back and he off Højbjerg and passed it straight to Hazard. It was a great pass, and he also got a goal as well in the second half. So it was a really good performance, and I think Barkley does deserve it. At Chelsea, playing with those players, he must have learned a lot, and I think it's a good start for him. And I think Southgate, he's gone back to a player that was one of the brightest talents a few years ago, but Barkley could have the ability to, because personally watching Jesse Lingard, he is a hard worker, but he's not got half the ability Barkley has on the ball. So Barkley's got a real chance now with those injuries to really get himself in that first team.
I think with Barkley, as you say as well, that when he came through first at Everton, he was sort of rated as one of the best midfielders on the planet, possibly. And I think it's a shame that he hasn't quite yet reached that potential. But I think the move to Chelsea gives him that sort of freedom under Sarri to push on now and maybe reach the levels that people thought he could reach, and hopefully become a regular in the England team, because I think he's definitely got the talent there.
James Maddison's had a lot of hype as well. What do we think about his inclusion? A lot of people already building him up as a player who's going to be or can be crucial for England in the future, and he's a really hot prospect. What do we think about his inclusion and the role that he plays maybe for England in the next couple of years or so?
Big fan of
yeah,
Maddison.
so am I.
I think with Maddison and trying to bring in players like Mason Mount, fast tracking them from the Championship, Southgate is seeing from the World Cup. He played a back three because the defenders were the best passers of the ball, and he used Sterling's movement and Lingard and Ali's runs to create some space for the back three to bring the ball out. But we didn't have any creativity in midfield. It was Henderson on his own, and Lingard and Ali running and creating space, but it wasn't really a creative, and that's ultimately why we failed to create much in the World Cup. And now he's realised that we have to have some creativity in midfield and a lot of dynamism. And I think Maddison is one of those players. I obviously didn't really watch him last year at Norwich, and I saw bits of him, but not much. So I was really excited to watch him, and he's so far been superb, and he definitely deserves his a call into the team. It's exactly what England have been crying out for in midfield.
I mean, to be honest, I'm quite surprised. I mean, I knew he was good. Obviously, I watched a fair bit of Championship football with Ipswich, and him playing for Norwich, he sort of got special attention whenever there was a derby game or whatever. And I watched them, and I thought he was obviously their key standout player, and they would often try and get the ball to him. But I certainly didn't think, £25 million player, potential England call-up. I thought he was good, but not sort of great or special particularly. But then I have to say that since he's moved to Leicester and just sort of slotted into that team and become a reasonably crucial part of that team for them pretty much instantly, and I've really sort of noticed that progression even in a very short space of time, I think. So if he can continue on that upward trajectory, then there's no reason why even in the short term he can be really useful for England, and as he establishes himself more as a Premier League player. So I am pleased to see him involved, and good luck to him as well. Looking ahead then to the games themselves in the Nations League against Croatia and Spain. Croatia, we're away in Croatia. England are on Friday in Rijeka. Will be a slightly surreal game, and it'll be played behind closed doors because of fan trouble in Croatia recently. So that will be a difficult situation for the players. And then, of course, on the Monday, England travel to Seville to face Spain. We'll start with the game then. It's going to be a bit of a weird one with that lack of atmosphere. How do you think the players will cope with that? Does that suit England? Is that going to be difficult for Croatia without their home support behind them?
I've seen that Croatia won 3 out of the 4 games that they've played behind closed doors, so I don't think it'll affect them. It could affect England, I think. Being a young team as well, I doubt any of them would have played behind closed doors before. But I think it's just a good opportunity to see how the young players do. I think it's quite exciting to watch the likes of Maddison, Mount, the players we've mentioned. The result, again, we might want a bit of revenge from the World Cup semi-final, obviously. But as an England fan and watching England, I just want to see us play in the right way, have something to build from. The result for me isn't the most important thing for these kind of games. I know that they're competitive games now, or they're trying to be competitive. But as long as we see a framework that Southgate can use for upcoming games and important matches, then I'm sure it'll be a really tough game. But I do see Croatia as a side that peaked in the World Cup, and that's probably the best we'll ever see from them for the next 10 years. I mean, Modric, Rakitic, Mandzukic, they're all past their best. Modric in particular is a brilliant player, but he's reached his peak now, and it can only be downward from there. So I think England are a side on the up, while Croatia are a side on the down. So I think we've got a good chance, and it'll be a good game to see how far England have come, even just from the World Cup, because we had a few disappointing results, losing to Spain. And we had a bad run of 4 consecutive losses. So if we can go there now and get a result, it'll be impressive. So I'm interested to see how we do.
I think with Croatia as well, obviously they're coming off the back of that 6-0 thrashing to Spain, and the manager will expect a response from them, and I'm sure they'll deliver that response. So I think it'll be a difficult match for England. I think I will take a point out of that, and then move on to Spain and hopefully pick up something there as well. But I think it'll be a difficult test for them, and we'll see how they go.
Yeah, I mean, people are still judging, I think, how to feel about this Nations League as a competition, because, as you say there, Jason, it's a bit like we don't know whether it feels like a competitive game, but it also feels a bit like a friendly, and the result isn't the most important thing, even though it is a competitive game. It feels like fans and players and everyone really is still trying to find their feet and adapt to know what this competition is, really.
I totally agree. I agree. It's a bit of a weird one, because normally if it had the title of international friendly, the there'd be a bit of interest in it, but there's a general apathy towards it from the British, English fans. Sorry, but with this added, say, competition and promotion and relegation, normally this game would be billed as maybe a relegation crunch match in
a three-team group.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, because it is a 3-team group, and everyone just feels a bit weird about it because it is the first time it's been introduced, and I don't think we'll quite know or realise the importance of it until maybe after the first promotions, relegations, and until European qualification for the Euros, because I think is it the winner of the groups go up into a knockout competition.
Yeah, so the winners of the top tier, which obviously England are in, of the 4 3-team groups go into semi-finals and then finals, and then of course the bottom ones of each group get relegated into the second tier for whenever the next one is. and then there's also some way that they're going to work out how there's going to be some Euro 2020 qualification from it, but I don't think anyone actually understands that, so that's going to be interesting to see how that works out.
I think if you do well in this, then you can kind of get an easier seeding for the group or something like that.
It is a bit weird.
Isn't there also the thought process that at least one team from the lowest section of ranked teams will actually get a place in the Euros, which is going to be interesting for San Marino or Kazakhstan when they end up in the European Championship.
Especially when they're not part of Europe.
But Kazakhstan do qualify the European ones.
I know, but it's all contentious.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it'll add a bit of extra spice to the competition, and I don't know. It's just another measure that UEFA have taken to try and make football fans interested in international friendlies, really.
Okay, moving on then to the Spain game. Presumably we're seeing that as the harder one of the 2 away fixtures, and at the risk of making it, overdoing it and making it sound like relegation's a be all and end all and an awful thing, it might end up being in a situation, if we haven't got a positive result away at Croatia, then we do need to maybe even get a win away in Spain to come second in the group.
Yeah, the Spain game was a real tough one for England because we took the lead obviously with a wonderful goal started from Kane, bringing the ball out and passing to Luke Shaw, who crossed it in for Rashford. It was a really good goal, and then Spain after that just dominated, and we rarely even created anything. We were denied a goal that should have counted when De Gea dropped it and Welbeck put it in the last minute. I can't believe that goal wasn't given. But overall, Spain showed their class, and England looked a bit toothless. I mean, it was a real kind of England side crashing down back to earth after the World Cup. Spain are a wonderful side, gifted in midfield, and I think their manager Luis Enrique has brought in. He's kind of changed the dynamic of the squad. Out's gone David Silva, and England's in come Asensio and Saul. Those kind of players have been given more importance in the Spain team, and they're just brilliant. I mean, every generation just full of technical footballers, and it will be a test for England because although we have our own now youngsters like Maddison, Sancho, it'll be a test for them to see how they do, and it'll be really interesting. I'm looking forward to that game especially.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I remember watching Spain at home to Switzerland. I think it was at the Villarreal Stadium, and to be honest with you, they really didn't play well. This was under Lopetegui, and you could sense that going into the World Cup, everyone backed them, but the fans in their own country weren't certain, and I think there was a bit of uncertainty, and then all that happens. And Luis Enrique, like Jason said, has come in. He's breathed a bit of life into the team as the stalwarts have moved on, and various new players and other players have been given a chance to impress. And I think they're probably more optimistic now than they were during the World Cup, and I think it'll be an interesting game as there's several players that are perhaps unknown quantities at international level, and I mean, it's taken till now for like Paco Alcacer and Rodrigo to come into the fray, and it's nice to see a different looking Spain side, I guess. But like Jason said, they've still got the midfield technicians in there, and I expect it to be a tough game. But if we get points from both games, I'll be extremely happy.
And before we move on from international discussion for this week, Gareth Bale has been ruled out of Wales' friendly against Spain tomorrow night, and he's 50-50 for their Nations League game against Republic of Ireland next week, which takes place on the 16th, which is, let me just check which date that is. That's Tuesday next week. Moving on then to Eden Hazard and his comments about being torn between signing a new contract at Stamford Bridge with Chelsea or and his dream move to Real Madrid. He said, I don't want to say, yes, I am signing a new contract, and then in the end I don't end up signing. I want what's good for me, but I want what's good for the club because the club has given me everything. So I will see. Sometimes in my head I wake up in the morning and I think I want to go. Sometimes I think I want to stay. It is a hard decision. It is my future, he says. So, George, what do you think? Should he stay at Chelsea? Should he go to Real Madrid? Take this however you want, really, I suppose, because there might be different answers from his personal perspective and from Chelsea's perspective, obviously.
Yeah, I think Jason said a few weeks ago Pogba to Barcelona sort of seemed like the natural way it was heading. I think this is sort of the same. Again, a player of Hazard's quality doesn't. Eventually, you've just got to let him go because he's that good, and we've seen this season just how good he can be. And there was a year or so when I think when Mourinho was there, he sort of didn't get the best out of him, and people had the questions. But he's always been an unbelievable player, and I think when you start hearing things like it's a dream move, I think that just tells you that eventually he will go, a bit like Coutinho. So it'll be a shame to see the back of him, but I think Chelsea fans have probably got more out of him than they expected. So for them, I think they've just got to enjoy him while he's still here in the Premier League as well, because this season he's playing out of his skin.
I totally agree. I think it's really nice to see a player be completely honest and open with the fans, the club, and the press. I don't think you see this all too often from top level players, and especially when he's playing so well. I do think it is only a matter of time before he goes to Real Madrid, and boy do they need him. I mean, their form this season has been terrible, to put it politely. But for him, you can't really deny a player the dream move when they're playing that well. And he seems, especially since the World Cup, like he's matured a hell of a lot and took that next step before being maybe a one sort of selfish player. And now looking at him, I don't see him in the same light as, say, like Neymar. For instance, I think he's a total team player, and he's got that flair and that unpredictability that teams absolutely love and managers love in the side. And I appreciate him playing in the Premier League, but I think it's only a matter of time before he moves to La Liga.
I think it also depends a little bit who the manager is at Real Madrid at the end of the season, because we've seen in the past that I think Hazard plays better in a more attacking environment. I'm not quite sure under Lopetegui that Real Madrid are quite that at the moment. But of course, the size of the club will, I think, sway his opinion in the end. But we'll obviously see what happens. And if he does make that move, I think he fully deserves it, because he's been a brilliant servant to Chelsea. Goals, assists, and now he's getting that team playing, as Ollie said. And I think he'd really make a big impact in La Liga.
Yeah, and I think that he's respecting the fans, and he's not trying to, as Ollie sort of alluded to there, he's not trying to sort of con anyone or lead anyone up the garden path or anything like that. He's just being honest about it, which even though he is suggesting that he might end up leaving, I'm sure Chelsea fans will respect that he is being honest about it and being open should that go ahead. Yeah, go on, Jason. Yeah, sure.
Hazard, If from a neutral perspective, because obviously there's United players and that I enjoy watching, but from just a neutral perspective, he is the only player that I really love to watch, and I think personally he's the best player in the league. As Ollie and Ryan and George mentioned, he's got so much quality, and he has been honest, and that's good to see, because you get these players that don't lie, but they give 50-50 and they say, I would love to stay, but there are things, he's been honest with Chelsea, and he even said a few weeks ago that he did want to go in the summer after the World Cup. He did want to leave, but Chelsea were honest with him. They spoke to him and they said you can't leave, and he just got on with his business. I think under Sarri he's been given a new lease of life. He is more central to Chelsea now. There's more options off the ball. He's got more runners, and he's been more selfish in terms of finishing. He's more clinical, and at times he hasn't had that real edge to him that the likes of maybe Messi and Ronaldo have, where all they are thinking about is goals, while Hazard in the past has been a bit more unselfish. I think in the right times this year he has been more selfish, and we've seen the best out of him. Honestly, he's the only player that is keeping Chelsea going in terms of a title challenge, because without him they'd be nowhere, and I really struggle to see where they replace him, because he's that good. He's definitely top 3-5 players in the world.
That's what I was going to ask, actually. Say they did get a nice chunky fee from Real Madrid for him. If you were sorry, who would you go out and replace him with? I mean, it's a real big kind of hole.
Jadon Sancho?
You reckon, yeah?
Point out there, maybe. You never know.
You've
got to look at someone young who isn't... No, because you can't compare Hazard with anyone now who's on a par with him. But maybe in the future there are players abroad that must have that world-class ability, potential. Because I'd hate to see, just from a neutral again, I'd hate to see Hazard leave because he's such a great player. But it'd be good for their rivals, Chelsea's rivals, if he did leave. But it'd be an absolute nightmare to replace him.
I mean, I don't think they'd be able to. I think the problem that Chelsea have got is that while they are a very reputable club in world football, they're not in that top, the bracket that a Real Madrid or a Barcelona are when it comes to making these big signings. So they couldn't replace someone who had the same level of Eden Hazard with someone who had the same level of quality. So they would have to go down the route of looking for someone who potentially could be like him in the future. I mean, they signed him from Lille in 2012 for about £32 million. I know that's an awful lot of money still, but then if he does go to Real Madrid, that's another progression up. So they're going to have to then look for a similar route of getting someone for around that amount of money who can then be good in the future for them.
They've got some players in the youth academy. I mean, Callum Hudson-Odoi is part of that generation of Phil Foden, Jadon Sancho. I watched him in pre-season. He was absolutely outstanding, and for the life of me, I don't understand how he hasn't been given a game. I think he came on. I think he actually started in the Community Shield. He was up against Kyle Walker, and it was difficult for him. But to not see him play in the Europa League or any cup games is disappointing.
I agree.
He's a real talent on the wing. He's quick, direct, skillful. He's got tons of ability. I think he's only 17, 18, but he is one to look out for, I think. It's just whether he's ready now. I mean, Hazard, Real Madrid, I can't understand why they never spent any money in the transfer window to replace Ronaldo. I mean, Bale, as we've seen today, is injured again, and he's a talisman this year, but you can't rely on him for the whole season. They've got Benzema up front, who was a good partner for Ronaldo, but not enough to carry the burden of goals. They needed to get a striker, and they probably needed two players for Ronaldo, one for the goals and another player out wide, because he was so important for them. They've gone 4 or 5 games without scoring. They needed someone. I thought they were going to go for Hazard or Mbappe, even Neymar. I know it would have been difficult to pull off, but I think they will go back in for Hazard, and I think it's inevitable that he will leave.
So, do you believe Hazard is enough to replace Ronaldo?
No, I think they need another striker as well, because Benzema's not enough up top.
So, obviously they signed Mariano back because he had a buyback clause, but...
No, he's a young, unproven... He's not even a young, so I think he's mid-20s, but... No, they need Hazard and a striker. I don't know which striker, because there aren't any about. You could maybe pluck Icardi out there, or maybe even Cavani, but I don't think it's top class, but he'd be enough to get you 25 goals a season. There are scarce amount of strikers. There aren't many about at the moment, so I don't actually know who they would go for. It's a difficult one, but Benzema isn't enough. I mean, they're miles off this year, Real Madrid. it's not a surprise to see them struggling.
Okay, then moving on to the leagues where Thierry Henry might end up as a manager. Of course, he was very much linked with the Aston Villa role when Steve Bruce left last week. But now there are reports linking him to be lined up with the Monaco job. It's believed that their current manager Leonardo Jardim will be sacked, given that Monaco are right down there, almost in a relegation scrap in Liga at the moment, which is complete opposite end of the table to where they'd want and expect to be. So where do we think Henry will end up? I know that's a bold call. I think should he be offered the Monaco one, he's more likely to go there than Aston Villa. And if that is the case, where does that leave Villa in their search for a manager?
I think it's quite an interesting one because I can equally see him being at both clubs. It'd be nice to see him get the Monaco job in terms of being given, a French football legend being given a chance, a shot in his own.
And he started his playing career there, and won the league with them as well.
Yeah, so he's got an affinity with the club. So it's not just like he's been plucked out of midair. Because you look at Patrick Vieira, he's been given a chance at Nice, another club that has had money in the past, and he's doing all right. But I don't know. It's a tough one. I'd like to see him get the Monaco job, but at the same time, it's a risky job to go to, I guess. Only because if he doesn't make an impact straight from the off, then it's going to be a baptism of fire for him, isn't it?
Especially with them, where they are in the league. They can't afford to be any worse than they are for much longer in the season, because then they're in a proper relegation battle, which is not what anyone would have expected.
Yeah, exactly. But as for him going to Villa, again, I won't mind seeing him there. I mean, there was talk. I saw someone the other day suggesting that him and John Terry should partner up as some sort of managerial duo and manage Villa. I think that would be quite a interesting thing to see. But I don't know. It's a tough one. I think both clubs probably need a little bit more of an experienced manager. I mean, no one expected Jardim to do so badly at Monaco this season, but it's obviously not gone his way. And I don't know, maybe a bit of a fresh set of eyes on the job, and a World Cup winner and an icon to most young French footballers and footballers around the world. To be fair, it could give them a bit of energy that they need, but I don't know. A lot of it remains to be seen with Monaco and Villa.
If I were him, I'd stay as far away from Villa as possible. I think it could be a terrible move if he went there. I think that's a really hard club to go in and manage straight up. The expectation levels are ridiculous, off the chart. And obviously the squad's there, but if I were him, I think Monaco not doing so well. The likelihood is he'll go there and improve them, because you can't get much worse as they're doing at the minute. So it's his home country. I just think that's more of a straightforward move for him. And Villa, and I'm not sure how much he knows about the Championship, but obviously he's an unbelievable player. I don't know if he's going to be an unbelievable manager, but I just think he'll know more about the French league, and the Championship's an incredibly hard league to come in and manage and guide a team straight up. And I'm sure all the players at Villa would love working with him, but I don't think you can underestimate how tough a job that is.
And where does that leave Villa in terms of the search of a manager? If we're going to assume that if he does take or get offered one of those jobs, it would be Monaco. Where does that leave Villa in this situation?
Rui Faria apparently is set to be the new manager. Mourinho's former assistant. Apparently John Terry is going to be the assistant manager. Rui Faria is going to be the. According to Sky Sports, that's what's set to happen.
I think that's a bit of a risk for Villa, to be honest. But a point in, I think Henry, given his playing career, I think would definitely make a solid manager.
But you don't know that. I mean, look how many failed managers there've been who've been amazing footballers.
But it does take one club to give them a chance, doesn't it?
It does, but I think Henry, not because he doesn't know the Championship. I know George said that, but I do disagree, because look at Marcelo Bielsa, 10 games in, they're third. They've played outstanding football, the best football I've possibly ever seen in the Championship in terms of playing out from the back. He's transformed the team from what they were last season. with not that much money spent. I think the thing with Henry is, I think Monaco is the best move for him, not because he. I just think Villa's a poison chalice. I don't see him coming in there 2 months in. I think it'll be a very difficult job for him because he's never managed before. He's not even managed anyone. He's been an assistant at Belgium. I think the best job for him would be Monaco. I feel sorry for Jardim because he won the league there. He got into the Champions League semi-final with young kids, and they all got sold and they barely replaced them. And I do sympathise with him because he's had a real struggle the last couple of years. I mean, he's done an amazing job, and to leave that club 18th, it's tough for him. But I think Henry will, going back to a club that he was as a kid. I'm sure he's got some knowledge there. He's probably been watching them a lot as well. I think that makes sense for him to go there.
Rui Faria and Dean Smith, the Brentford manager, are the two
Dean
emerging.
Smith would be a really good appointment. But
they're
if I were
the
him, I
two
wouldn't go.
emerging favourites at the moment.
I don't know why he'd leave Brentford at all.
He's a Villa fan. He is a Villa fan.
Is he?
Yeah.
I think the way Brentford operate is sort of in a unique model. I think it would be silly for him to leave, given how well they're doing. And I think going into Villa, obviously boyhood fan, but the fans are expecting success immediately. And I think if he doesn't get that, could that sort of tarnish his legacy with the Villa fans? And what does that impact? What sort of jobs he can get in the future if he does fail there?
I think it's interesting because for managers, they're all motivated by different things. But I mean, you look at, for instance, Grayson when he went to Sunderland. He was on a bigger contract and he had bigger budgets, better players to work with, arguably. I'll leave that one for you to dispute. But perhaps Dean Smith. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's got a great squad at the minute there, and I agree it'd be ridiculous for him to leave, but being that boyhood fan, it does.
And more money.
Yeah, exactly. It sways your position, and I think having more money and players like Balassi and Abraham, I know they're only on loan, but to have them in the Championship and to not be in the top six is criminal, really.
Bruce had a terrible start. I mean, he underachieved massively this year. Unfortunately, he's a past-it manager.
Wow, big call.
He is. I mean, I just think him, Neil Warnock, Mick McCarthy.
But see, I don't put Bruce quite in the McCarthy or Neil Warnock zone. Yes, his football is not, it's not the most stylish, but I don't think he's quite sort of so proper old school, just kick people kind of approach to things. I think he's got a little bit more about him, and I'd like to see him get another job in the relatively near future if that's what he wants. But I think we've come to the point in the show where I throw it over to the Preston fans amongst us. A big win against clearly a very poor Wigan side in the weekend, of course. 4-0, guys. You must be absolutely chuffed with it.
Yeah, it was a very good win. I think we've shown signs of that sort of result all season. I know obviously we've been sat near the bottom all season, but I think the way we played hasn't necessarily reflected where we are in the table, and I think Saturday everything just came together. Made a few changes in defence with Tom Clark coming in and Jordan Story alongside him, who's really impressed, and I think that looked solid against admittedly poor Wigan side. But yeah, I think a really good result and one that should set us up nicely for the next few games.
I tend to agree. We've got Callum, our resident Wigan fan, in the corner with us today, and he's throwing up all sorts of gestures because he simply doesn't believe it. But he was there, I was there, all of us Preston fans were there to watch a 4-0 thrashing. And I've got to admit, towards the start of the game, Wigan did look like a side that were confident and that looked all right on the ball. But after Powell had to go off injured, and then after the Darren Gibson sending off in the 56th minute, to bring on Dan Burn and play a back five, I couldn't understand it from a Preston point of view. I was like, we're bottom, no disrespect to us, North End, but we're bottom of the table. We're bottom of the table for a reason. It's because we concede goals. So for him to put a defender on, I mean, it's quite a compliment to us because he must have shown it. Well, to us it shows a bit of fright. But it was really nice to see us gain a bit of confidence on Saturday and score goals and not actually concede them. I think it was fantastic to see Lucas Nemecha playing up to the standards that he'd been billed to. And Tom Barkhuizen, he's not had the best of starts to this season, admittedly, but I think he played out of his skin, and for me, he was my man of the match on Saturday. He looks a completely different player, and when he scored the goal, he's put his hands to his ears, and it's a celebration, getting a reaction off the fans because they had got on his back, but it was really nice to see him back to his old self. I'd say, and you could see he was really putting a shift in. And the team as a whole, I thought, was much more cohesive and showed signs of last season in the performance. And, we ran out 4-0 winners and, it showed. It was really nice.
I think you were just on about Nemecha there. I think coming into the club, obviously, first professional club, first professional games that he's played, and I think it has taken him a bit of time to adapt to the English Championship. He's been able to watch and sort of pick up the style of play and then continue to sort of improve and develop, and I think he's brought that into his games now.
So, but Wigan were not great. I mean, I'm not just doing this just to wind up Callum because he's in the room, but watching from Preston's point of view, watching them, do they have any reason for concern after what was a good start to the season?
Personally, I just think it was a blip. I think they've certainly got, looking at the squad, the starting lineup and the team they do have, it's certainly championship level. Paul Cook obviously has his side believing in what he wants to try and instill in the style of football he wants to play, and you could see Nick Powell was their talisman, but every team has a central player and a central creative player, and after he went off, it took a bit of a sting out of their style of play, but I think they're fine for this season. I don't think they'll get playoffs, but it's one of those, a bit like Blackburn, where where I do believe they'll be safe mid-table, yeah. But I think with the takeover set to be completed within about 6 weeks, it could be added finances, added funds to into the coffers, and you never know, they could become one of these big fancy, big spending teams. A bit like Middlesbrough or Leeds. I mean, it'd be weird to see, but it was a particularly disappointing performance for Paul Cook's side, and I mean, it was much to the delight of us.
So, George, what did you make of the Preston game at the weekend?
Yeah, really good result for us. We needed it before the international break. I don't believe that Wigan will be that bad for the rest of the season, and that they've definitely not been performing like that because they're doing all right in the league. But from a Preston perspective, it's exactly what we needed. Not just a win, a confident win, a lot of goals, but the clean sheet was the most important thing, and that gives us a lot of confidence now, where we can have a rest for a couple of weeks and gear up for a couple of winnable games. I think we've got Hull coming up and Rotherham. So yeah, just exactly what we needed. Everything just seemed to click into place. And it could have been more really on the day.
Lovely. Moving on then to my team, Ipswich, briefly. The short story is that we managed to secure our first win of the season, so we're no longer the only championship team without one. 3-2 win away at Swansea. Very unexpected, of course, because Swansea have been playing really well, not conceding goals. And to be brutally honest, we probably deserved to lose it about 8-3. But we kept going, and took our chances when they came our way. And actually, looked to get forward and be creative and offensive when we could do, rather than just sitting back at the times in the game when we did have the lead, particularly when we went up 2-1. That's kind of different to how we would have played it maybe in the last few years under McCarthy, and maybe we were rewarded as a result of that with the positive result. Looking forward to the international after the international break. Hopefully we can continue that good run of form. Finally, before we finish this afternoon, we'll have a bit of a summary of how our predictions league is going after 2 weeks. Of course, no games to predict this week because it's an international break rather than there being any Premier League fixtures. But last week's scores, George was the winner for last week with 8 points. Myself and Jason both got 6. You, of course, didn't hear Jason's predictions, but he sent them through to us. And Ollie having an excellent week with 4. So that means that Jason leads the way with 19. I'm on 17, George is on 16, and Ollie's on 14. And that's it for Goalmouth Scramble this afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back next week, of course, to talk all things in the footballing world. But from all of us here and me, Tom Mortlock, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.